world right now, which is embracing digital governance and during this pandemic and beyond this pandemic, right? So we have this fantastic panel of speakers. So I'll just start adding them to the screen as well. So we have with us Siim Sikkut, the Government CIO of Estonia. Estonia is uh, shared as an example of e-governance. So we'll learn from him about the amazing work that they've been doing pre-COVID and how it has helped them during this time, and what are some of their learnings during this COVID initiative. Also, some of their startup initiatives. So their e-residency and the startup visa happen to be very popular. I personally know a bunch of startups from Pakistan who have gotten into the Estonia startup visa program. The second speaker for today is Saad Bashir. I would call him a dear friend. He is a Pakistani Canadian and currently in America. He was the CIO of Seattle. He was the CIO of Ottawa, sorry, the capital of Canada. And then he was appointed the Chief Technology Officer for the city of Seattle. We have previously done a full length interview with Saad and published an article on his life journey. So we'd love to kind of give perspective on his learnings from Canada and then working in Seattle and then suddenly digitalizing everything during this pandemic as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Saad and Seem. Uh, so third, we have our very own from Pakistan, representing the National IT Board, the default CIO of Pakistan, Shabahat Ali Shah. He is an ex-Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He was brought to Pakistan to help us digitalize the government, and I think this is especially an interesting time for him, given that he was already doing a number of things, and then this pandemic came upon, and we'd love to learn how Pakistan is responding to the pandemic. NATB developed the National COVID Tracking Portal. So that is going to be an interesting conversation. So thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Seem, Saad, and Shabahat.
Thank you, Ardish.
Yeah, so let me start by addressing the elephant in the room, I would say. So I'd love for each of you to kind of share some insights on what are some of the challenges that COVID has brought forward in your respective territories, and what are some of the opportunities in terms of digital governance.
Sure, I can go ahead and start. The list of challenges and the list of issues that were uncovered because of COVID, the list is endless. And I'm sure the kinds of challenges we are facing here, Shabahat and Seem are facing the same in their respective areas. I would say that one that comes to mind right away is that city of Seattle is known around the world to be a very well-connected, innovative city. Lots of headquarters of big companies. But because of COVID, one thing that we realized even more was the digital divide that exists between a small population of folks in Seattle who perhaps don't have the same access to digital tools and broadband internet that has become really the lifeline for people to survive when they have to work remotely. And so that has been not a surprise, but it has really encouraged us to accelerate a lot of things to make sure that we can bring those folks along as well in our journey. So, like I said, there are many others that I could talk with, but that's the one that I would like to say.
Thank you, Saad. Over to you, Seem.
Perhaps if I jump in here, I think from Estonian side, I mean, we clearly would like to think more about the whole pandemic and the crisis exactly as an opportunity, not because of the cliche, but really speaking, what we have seen in Estonia. And perhaps I should give a bit of context to those who are not that familiar with us. We have been on digital services and government journey for the last 20 years. Literally anything as a citizen you need to do with the government, you can do online, in our case. Still, the only exceptions where you still have to show up, for example, is to get married, because we see it's a high risk thing, uh, jokingly. But the point being that because of all that was available, so switching to remote work or switching to government to remote from operate from a distance was not that much of a deal. And so we have seen it pays to be digital because you're resilient for whatever sort of comes your way in that sense. And we see it as an opportunity that hopefully, whether it's our example or whether it's now the learning of this need to be digital in other governments, cities, nations, so forth, that actually perhaps it's been a turning point that will stay.
Thank you, Siim. Over to you, Shabahat.
Yeah, thank you, Arzish, for inviting me today. Yeah, I think coming from a country like Pakistan and facing a challenge like this, we have got more or less the same challenges, but then the scale of those challenges are a little bit bigger. In Pakistan, in comparison to what you can find in Estonia or Seattle. For example, we have, mobile penetration of cell phones in the area across Pakistan, 80%, but then the smartphone penetration is very low in Pakistan in comparison to the neighboring countries and in comparison to the developed countries as well. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that I've been facing is that we have crafted a strategy to combat this particular pandemic across Pakistan. But in order to get that message on a handheld device of a particular citizen has become a challenge. And we have trying to figure it out, various methods, various medium to get to the person on the last mile, to make him understand that this is real, this is happening, and they have to follow the directions given to them by the government in their respective areas. In terms of opportunities, yes, I think we have been striving a lot in the past a few years to create a digital economy of Pakistan, make Pakistan more financially, inclusive of people on digital transactions. So since people have gone into quarantines, so we are trying to build those systems, taking an opportunity from this crisis, how we can, include people, how we can stay away from the cash economy and move more towards digital economy and make the economy more documented. So I think these are the two things I would be very vociferous in terms of speaking about these two things.
If I can build on that, and I would love to hear from you, Siim, on this, as we are getting our economies more digitized and not as an option anymore, but really the only way in some cases to do business, especially with the government. What type of privacy and surveillance concerns, and how are you tackling them, Siim? If in Seattle, for example, that has been a huge deal for us. We're leading the nation, we think, around some of the privacy and surveillance policies and the executions of those, but would love to hear from both of you.
Slim, you would like to go first?
I'll try. Let me just make sure that as it was scrambling a bit, that I got your question right. So about sort of privacy was it about privacy in the context of going digital?
Yeah, we are going digital. We have no option to go digital. So privacy and surveillance, some quick thoughts on that.
Okay, sorry, still keep losing you a bit because of
connection. Okay, I'll go. I'll go with one, Saad.
Jump in back with a question yeah.
Shabahat?
Yeah, so I'll go on this one. So if you look at the paradigm in which our country lives in, we haven't gone through that. We haven't covered that kind of a mileage in terms of building our system at the government level, where we would say that, hey, we've built the first level of thresholds beyond which we can actually craft a data privacy act, or we can craft all those kind of policies which would limit or which would give a cover to our citizens in terms of privacy, right? So I think we are still in that phase of building those systems, after which we would feel confident that building a data protection policy at the government level would really would be able, would really be materialized. And let me put it that way. It's not. It's kind of a work in the progress at the moment. So what does it mean for the people? Um, People are not very aware about their privacy. In that context, it's just that government is trying to make them understand that they have to be aware of their privacy also. So if there are other private sector companies who are interfacing with them, the telcos which are interfacing with them, they should question them that if you are sharing our data across different platforms, you need to make us aware what you are actually sharing. So for on our part of the world, it's more about awareness at the moment than anything else.
Right, right, right. And I would say that just like how when we build digital systems, we think of cybersecurity as a pillar and we build it at the very beginning, we don't think about it at the end. I think for privacy guidelines, if they are built at the very early stages of business requirements in any system that we're deploying, it makes a huge difference and actually a huge opportunity cost that can be saved. Back to you, Sim. Did you wanted to add anything to this? You're on mute. Sim, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So the way that we approach the whole topic in Estonia, at least, is to say that if you want to be and go digital, privacy is not a question. It has to be preserved. So the way that we at least approach this is to say that it's like an enabler or a necessary step to go there. It's something that we don't want to compromise. Even, for example, if something like COVID hits our way, same thing with cybersecurity. So I think what we have seen is that, but it's not the barrier that we also cannot overcome. What we have seen is that there's laws, processes, technologies we can put in place to make sure that actually privacy is kept even if we go digital. So in that sense, let's say again, if it's COVID time or otherwise, we see that there's like just exactly one same bundle or the other necessary side of the same coin. So yeah, that's why at least we have been able to build it up in practice, and that's why, for example, we have been able to go that far digitally now, because there's trust in what we do and how we do it.
Right, right. Yeah. And for the audience, Arzesh, if anybody was interested, they could Google up Seattle Privacy Office and they will go to a landing page that has lots of those policies and approaches that we are undertaking here.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think those are some amazing insights. I'll come to the next question, which is somewhat related to this. When you talk about security, it's probably concerned with all this amount of public data that is available, right? And probably the most important thing when we talk about digital governance or digital government is the availability of this data for the general public or for the masses, right? For maybe use like APIs or digital platforms, right? So you can whoever wants can answer this question. So what are some of the open data strategies being used by your government or some plans that are yet to take place?
Sure. I mean, open data is a bit of a tried and tested concept in the world. And so us as a city of Seattle, we have a ton of open data sets that we have been publishing for the last several years. We have a very dynamic open data portal. It's used for the public to have better insight on what we are running, how we are running the government. It's also used by some folks to monetize the data and build, tools and applications. And the city uses it, of course, for decision making. I think what we're finding is that open data, instead of being an afterthought, needs to be front and center when we are again deploying a system. When we are thinking about a system, we should always look at it with a filter of what type of data would we feel appropriate to extract from it and make it available on the open data portal. I think that shift in thinking is going to dramatically increase how much more data we can pump out. Shabahat?
Yeah. So this is a great question. I think um, the kind of stuff that I'm grappling with at the moment, right? Since I took over as the CEO of National IT Board at the federal government level, is that I have to craft a strategy to create an open data portal for Pakistan uh, to achieve two basic objectives, right, at the government level. I would like to use our data to give people across the venture capitalists around the world to look at what Pakistan has got to offer in terms of investment, right? I think Pakistan has got tremendous opportunity. When I look around the world, the landscape of different countries across the world, what they have achieved and what they actually are, and what they have got to offer to the rest of the world, Pakistan is placed at a strategic position in context of their resources, in context of the opportunities in the field. It is absolutely green space. So if an investor coming in from somewhere in Silicon Valley, for that matter, the kind of stuff that these investors look for, we have got that, right? It just boils down to how efficiently we can project in context of data that the government has for them to build that kind of a confidence that we can come on board, invest in those specific areas, and we can get the return on investment immediately in a span of 2 to 5 years. So that kind of I am taking that kind of an angle when if I'm converting the data that we have accumulated in terms of an open data portal. By the way, in Pakistan, there is no open data portal of the government that exists at the moment. There is tons and tons of valuable data that exists in Pakistan. Tons of, I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how excited I was to look at the data.
Right.
But there is some work that needs to be done here.
Absolutely, and I think in Pakistan, because there's like a lot of data, right? So all these 200 million people, and then all the services, and since you've helped build the Nadra ecosystem earlier, right? I think you yourself realize the importance of this data being publicly available. So I'll throw the same question to Siim, but maybe in the context that what are some of the open data strategies or platforms that they've been using, right? Because I'm sure they've done this way before COVID. Yeah, so we can't hear
Still
you,
on
right?
mute.
We're still having trouble hearing you, Siim.
Yeah.
Shabahat, have you, back in Pakistan, thought about monetizing the data
Yeah,
and putting a value on those data sets? For example, in the city of Seattle, we don't charge people because maybe we don't need to. But I'm
yeah,
assuming, given the billions of logs of records that you folks are sitting on, can you put a
yeah,
price tag on it and maybe incent the private sector to help you monetize it?
yeah. No, absolutely. So I have got a plan, an execution plan right there. Absolutely. Um, it's just that this COVID thing hit and it took the country by storm. It took my organization by storm, actually. And those initiatives, took a backseat because I had to build systems to combat this, this parasite.
Right.
But I've got an execution plan that I've choked out with a few private sector companies to help me build, a facade based upon this data, which we can actually monetize. Absolutely, on the dot. Yeah.
Right. Siim, are you back?
Yes, so hopefully
Perfect.
better now. Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Sorry,
hear you
we
now.
keep having these storms in the background that scramble the connections. Look, open data wise, and I hope you hear me well now. Estonia was a bit slow coming open data way for a particular reason. Many governments started going open data because that was a way to also get sharing going between government departments even. That was a way to basically push for data sharing to happen, for better and seamless service delivery for front end, for the end user, for people on the street. Now, in our case, we had built up government-wide data sharing and interoperability capability already before. So that's because we came up with quite early with a joint shared platform for this that we call X-Road, which is the point we are able to connect the whole of government together anyway. That meant that we didn't have this initial push for open data, but we still brought it in exactly to give a chance to open us up for innovation from a wider circle of sources, be it academy, be it companies. So the classic stuff that look, let's open up so that others can actually build stuff that we don't then have to build, for example. And in our case, we gave open data even more go because of the beginning of AI movement. So as we see that artificial intelligence, even in its today's narrow form in a way, is so powerful in making our government so much more efficient. So open data has been part to encourage actually companies, agencies to go open data way, AI way. And so what we have seen in here is that so ultimately it's been quite a journey because as sharing happened between agencies anyway, it was hard for us to describe, okay, why do you need to do this and how to do this? So it actually becomes a natural step in data governance. But basically, at first, many governments around the world, and us included, we did it like a separate thing on its own, right? But it should be just exactly like, even if I simplify to that level, a click of the button in a regular sort of, data governance daily routine and work, saying, okay, so that's open, that's not now. So we had to basically come to this point where it just becomes a natural part of how we do things as we manage the data in the government agencies. And that's been a journey, but I think we're getting there.
If I can shift gears, Arzesh, just slightly, I would love to talk about resilience. When I was growing up in Karachi and when there was a blackout, our resilience against electricity or lack of was we would light up a candle or open the window so air could come in. We're finding that we are getting our organizations to a stage where without some of the digital tools that we have in place, if those tools don't work one day, really the entire government may fall apart. We're talking about some basic collaboration tools, for example. It's more of a thought than a question. Are you folks thinking about technology resilience, which comes at a cost because you have to pay premium if you want to add resilience to your systems? Is that something on your mind?
I can start in that sense, saying that it clearly is. And it's the same sort of story as I was trying to explain with privacy a bit before. If in a sense saying we see it's the necessary cost of being digital, or at the necessary cost of being fully digital for that matter. In Estonia, at least, we are at a spot where we don't have an analog backup for what we do in the government, at least anymore. So basically, if stuff hits the ground, electricity-wise or cyber attack-wise, we have to actually have a digital alternative because there's like no registries on paper anymore that we can go back to or anything like that. So, so from that point of view, we do pay a premium in terms of having resilience, different sort of backup mechanisms. We had to do a bit of innovations on that front. But at the same time, I would still argue this comes against the savings we get from being digital only.
Okay. Shabahat, anything to add there?
Just a second. I'm just trying to adjust my volume here. Just a second, please.
It's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let me give you a very brief on the resilience piece here. So I think Pakistan on our side of the house, I think we have gone digital. There are a few areas where we have done a very good job in context of identity management. Right? We've done a very good job. We have done a very good job in terms of creating secure systems which pertains to identity management, which people can actually use within Pakistan and outside to validate their identity. But then usage of that particular product, be the national ID card, which is 100% digital, passport 100% digital, bank accounts 100% digital, usage in across various segments where they can actually create a you know um, a multiplier factor. That is something which we have not done enough on. I think, which is good, whether good or bad, in the sense that even if some of the digital systems, for example, break down, right, we have got a few manual processes running alongside those digital systems where people will fall back on. So and the fortress is not going to get crumbled.
Right.
But I feel in another couple of years, the way that we are moving, I think we are taking stride after stride in terms of going digital. A few milestones, if we can achieve, I think we would be well on our way to call Pakistan as, at least we will cross that minimum threshold of becoming a digital economy, right? So, and one of them which I'm actually pretty much eyeing for is a digital payment gateway for Pakistan, which Pakistan can own, just like Alipay. That's something that I intend to build, so that people will start looking at financial transactions to go completely digital. I think that would be one tipping point after I feel that we would be thinking about inducing resilience in terms of our digital system, if we can get those kind of systems in place.
Right, right. When you talk about Shabahat, the adoption, is it the user adoption that you are referring to? The folks for whom the source systems have been built, that they are being a bit slow to come on board?
User adoption, both, by the way. I would say user adoption as well as the bent of the government,
I see.
to induce people to start, think digitally as well. I think both.
Right.
Our bureaucracy is very, I mean, as you can imagine, right? Pakistan bureaucracy is a very, very well-oiled machine. They can get the work done the way that they're accustomed to get done in their way, but then speed is an issue.
Right.
For them to adopt digital systems at the government level will come at a price as well as with time also. So there is some resistance there. But then adoption at the user level, um, in some segments, are absolutely hungry. For example, small to medium scale enterprises, the SME side of the house, they are very hungry, right? I think they are adopting it like every day. They are taking long strides towards digital adoption. But then there are few, well, not few, is a kind of a bigger segment also, which is the lower middle class, which kind of a blue collar workers. For them, I think it's going to take some time. The upper middle class, right? They are going to take some time also, because they are getting their job done anyways.
Right.
Because their processes are also very well defined. It's this particular SME sector, the people who actually work in this SME sector and the people who own businesses. These guys are, I think, will actually make the biggest difference in terms of adoption in Pakistan, and then we are on our way to include them, towards digital economy.
One of the ways in which you may want to think about tackling the adoption on the government side is, just like you have a bureaucratic government, I think all governments share the same love for bureaucracy, whether they're in Pakistan or the US or Europe. I think one of the ways is maybe also focus on the new generation of government employees that you're bringing, and making sure that we are expecting certain type of digital behavior from them. I think that can also create some momentum within the organization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very true. Very true. I think in the first time in the history of Pakistan, in the last 2 years, we have recruited people on a very different kind of a compensation plan.
Right.
It's very the compensation plans have been crafted to attract people from abroad and to induce these new technologies, new vision, new execution strategies, so that we can start moving fast, or faster than what we used to before. Um, so I think there has been new blood that has been pumped in. and I think I'm very hopeful that our speed has gone, our speed has increased, manifold.
Hey, Sim, can I put you on the spot and ask you a question?
Go
You
ahead.
know, when Arzesh was thinking about putting this panel together, I immediately thought of you because I thought of Estonia and the digital government journey that you said you've been on for 20 years. But amongst friends, would you be able to share sort of one thing where Estonia may still be digitally struggling, or something that you have now found out because of COVID that maybe you're not as good as? Would love to know that.
Mhm. Well, we struggle in more than one place. Nobody's perfect at everything, no. But I mean, look, I mean, I'll bring out a few things. COVID didn't bring this out per se, but it highlighted for us again that we are still quite immature in terms of how we use data. I mean, as blunt as that. I think around the world, governments especially, but all organizations are struggling to build up their data capabilities, right? To draw insights from the data that we even have, and not even going to the world of big data yet, right? So basically, we're sitting on stuff we don't use to a quite degree. So, for example, to do even better inferences about sort of modeling for spread of COVID. I mean, we stumbled upon this quite late. What was the reason? The reason was that those who were doing health response and crisis response were not data literate. And so basically, and as they were 24 hours busy on stuff, if it's not in their head to think about how data could help them, you can't supplant it from the side somehow, right? So basically, and that limited the response in some ways. So it's been, we are on a journey to learn, basically evangelize and teach and learn about how to get data savvy, because tools exist, data exists, but literally just to get the demand up and running. Secondly, we have been quite slow to go to cloud, which again today is like de facto standard of how you do stuff in digital and in IT, right? Why we've been slow is that because legacy builds up so bloody fast. Legacy in terms of how you build stuff, the architectures you use, and so forth. We are now revamping a lot of our digital government technology stack exactly to be cloud ready more and more, and to basically be able to move there. So this means going microservice way and so forth. I'm not just throwing buzzwords in, but this is exactly the fundamental, the route we have to go if we want to be able to be more resilient as well, for example. And the third thing, if I just leave it with, look, we are tiny compared to Pakistan, of course, right? So we are a country of 1.3 million people. If each time we have failed in the past, we have failed because of one reason: we have made things too complex and big. Okay, so architecture-wise, as a basically as a project-wise, sort of so-called. And so what I think has become our sort of part of our sort of journey and progress because of that is that we have learned to tackle things in small bites, big or small. I think that's been sort of the way. So and we still sometimes fail, or let's say some agencies sometimes still come up with complex reforms, big chunks, 2-year master plans, whatever. Doesn't work.
Right. The reason why Shabahat and I were smiling at the 1.3 million, I think why Shabahat was smiling was because we can easily see that much and maybe even more of Estonia's population at one political rally in
Absolutely.
Pakistan. So
Absolutely.
the scale is different. Shabahat, can I? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to there is this thought that actually hit me. I thought that I'll share it with you guys. In terms of when we're talking about speed and we're talking about making things too complex, which takes time, and you are liable to err more and more if the time spent to build something suddenly becomes elongated, and more system, more and more processes goes into it to make it perfect, and then it never flies. So I'm going to share with you an extremely valuable experience that I had in COVID. So think about an enterprise resource management system, right? Whenever you talk about an ERP system, you're talking about years, right? Build a system like SAP or Oracle. You build like put 4 or 5 different modules, and project management guys will give you a timeline of 2 years. That one module after one module, you will be able to come up with a fully blown solution. Now there hits the COVID thing. And I've been called by the armed forces that we need to connect 4,000 hospitals across Pakistan, which first of all do not have any internet connectivity, right? 50% of them had no internet connectivity. Wow. They had some kind of an IT systems built in the in the hospitals, which were giving some kind of a data to a centralized console located in the provinces locally. And the directive was we need to connect all of these hospitals, get their data into a centralized database system in the capital city, run it as a decision-making system, right? To predict how many vents would we need in KPK province or Sindh province and Balochistan province. So they talked about having an ERP solution in 1 month. 1 month. We're talking, right? Normally we talk about, so how do you do that, right? If you start strategizing, start creating an SRS document, start creating functional specs document, this is never going to fly and people will start dying on the street, having no vents, access to no vents. So what we actually did, we started, first of all, we just built, the connectivity first. The connectivity was there, but it was not streamlined. So we just, first of all, connected these hospitals, started collecting the data, whatever form the data was coming in, Excel sheets, PDF documents, text files, CSVs, whatever you can think of. And all I did in the very first place to create a small team, which whole purpose of the team is to cleanse the data and create it into a format from which we can learn something. Right. So we did that in about 2 weeks or so. And the next 4 weeks, we only spent in terms of solving a particular problem, one problem, to give visibility to people where they can find the nearest vent, right, to go to and enroll them into that hospital, and get them and get their issues addressed in terms of the pandemic. And then everything was down the hill there. You solved one small thing, and the ERP system started evolving by itself. So I think within 2 months or so, we had this ERP system fully blown. Which, by the way, I've been getting calls from Italy, from Netherlands, right, from Spain, that the kind of resource management system that you built in such a short span of time, we would like to have, that system rolled out in one of our provinces as well. So, cutting the long story, I went on to a rant. But what I'm trying to, explain here is that is sometimes just getting down to the works and not investing time in terms of building a document in terms of all its complexity actually works. In our part of the world, it worked because the crisis was coming up with the speed of light, and we had nothing, and we had to build something from scratch somewhere. I think that's the key learning that I had. Had I been in Silicon Valley, I could have gone in a very different route.
Right. This is an amazing story, and this is exactly the sort of stuff that I had in mind. Let's say we came to the same point from another point of view. We just don't have enough, manpower, people to handle complexity. But you came to it really from different angle, and that's because you was stressed for time. So basically, I would be curious to hear, let's say, from you. Let's say, can you keep this up now as a practice, even during, let's say, peacetime, so-called?
Good question. Yeah.
No. So there is no peacetime in Pakistan, for that matter. We are a country where there are at least four disasters, right, that happen every year. 4 disasters: locust attack, flooding, dengue virus, and some kind of a pandemic. In this part of the year, it was COVID. So 4 crises, and I would like to use this kind of a platform as a pervasive platform to take care of all disasters that come in. So I'm taking it as a big opportunity.
Right, and I see that as a bit of a snowball effect. I think sometimes in government, especially, we want to create that perfect snowball before we can show it to the world. And what you're describing, Shabahat, is very small incremental activities can create a momentum of its own. And we have seen that in, for example, the digital adoption of tools such as digital signatures. In Seattle, for example, in our organization, at any given time before COVID, we would have thousands of papers being floated around different offices for a person's signature. Very old school. And literally in a matter of a few weeks, we have transferred almost the entire organization onto the digital signature platform. And it's so much so that Adobe showcased us at their international symposium a couple of weeks ago, because that was a success story, but we did not wait for a perfect plan. We just went ahead and did it. It ended up being a big success, to your point.
Yeah.
And I think Saad, your story is another sort of great example. What we have found in our journey, as well as talking to other governments around the world, is that often these tools exist, right? So my point being, I mean, just like with signatures, I mean, it was there waiting in sort of cupboard, so to speak, right? Same thing is often with governments. So we have solved it somewhere. I mean, somebody has something working anyway. So, but often we try to reinvent the wheel, and we could just, take, copy. Often stuff is even out there, open source wise. Take it, implement it, go ahead, right? So basically, I think there's a lot of attempts to be reinventing the wheels, whereas we could be sharing more. And again, I don't say this as a rhetoric, and that's exactly how we do it in Estonia. You mentioned signatures, and which are based in Estonian case on digital identity. We copied that bluntly from Finland back in the day because they had the best set of setup that worked. We took it, built on this, improved on this, and now it's basically infrastructure for the whole digital economy like that, right? So yeah. I think there's quite some. So I can clearly imagine, for example, now countries, calling you in Pakistan to basically get the ERP set up, because if it works, why reinvent this?
And I would add that the kind of behavior that Shabahat and we are all describing is the behavior that a startup would experience on a daily basis. And that is the community that, for example, Arzesh and young people like him represent. When I was at a conference in Islamabad in October at the invitation of Startup Grind, I was impressed beyond any expectation the energy and the ideas that those young kids had. And not even young kids, like anybody who was in that startup mode. I think it behooves the governments to make sure that we inject as much of that energy into the bureaucratic processes, and somehow we balance the bureaucracy that we are really good at with the startup culture that we all have in our respective areas.
Yeah. I saw that. I think what actually I also did try to execute is the kind of environment that we've been in, right? COVID, but even prior to COVID, the kind of pace that Pakistan wanted to move in terms of creating a digital economy and digital landscape, we need to have a startup kind of a culture. So Pakistan, I mean, think of Pakistan as a huge, a startup, in terms of digital, if you're talking about digital economy. So I try to pull in people from left, right, and center everywhere who think like, a startup executive, that we would like to have something which is given to us and take it forward with a startup mentality where abstraction, should not be an issue, shouldn't bother you, right? But you use your skills to find solutions within the, within the landscape of abstraction. So I think we have done a good job in the last year or so in terms of moving faster, of creating something.
Shabahat and Siim, with the startup culture, though, if I can play the counter argument here, comes a healthy amount of risk. Startups, we know that high-tech startups, particularly, more than 90% of them fail within the first 2 years. We only have one Amazon after 1 million failed startups. So I can share with you very quickly a way in which we have been able to embed the startup culture and taking some healthy risk and managing that risk. Back in Canada, we used to get a whole number of proposals from startup community to the city to buy their technologies and put them into motion. But they didn't really have a track record. And so for us, it was really difficult to put something in our water treatment systems, a technology that maybe will fail. So we created a program called the Innovation Pilot Program, where without going through a procurement process, without any exchange of money, we would just cover the cost of implementing a large scale demo within the government's different departments. And we would test it for 6 months. And in those 6 months, it would give us enough idea whether this is something that we want to implement on a full-scale basis. And if the answer was yes, we would go through a very quick procurement process, an expedited one. But that is how we were able to manage the risk that is very inherent when you try to do things on a quick scale in government.
Yeah. So yeah, no, the way that I've actually seen, the landscape of Pakistan when I just moved into the country like a year ago. By the way, I have moved to Pakistan exactly a year ago in this month.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, so it's been a kind of an anniversary for me as well. So we have done some, we've done a good job, by the way, in the last 2-3 years to create these incubators. So Arzish comes from an incubator as well, by the way. And these incubators are working well. I would not say siloed, but they are working in a specific paradigm where the government is funding these incubators, and there is a process that has gone into that funding, which I think limits the startup community to come in with some ideas and then execution. So I have tried to change, a little bit of the charter of these incubators. I'm the chairman of the board of the National Technology Fund as well. So I've changed the charter of Ignite, which we call it. And the guys are coming up with brilliant ideas. I mean, I come from Silicon Valley. I can tell you, what a valuable idea is. That's what we do, right? We take and we listen and have a feel of each and every new idea. I think brilliant ideas coming from there. The way that I have mitigated the risk, right? If the risk is the topic of discussion here, is to work with a few companies, a few startup companies who have covered some mileage in terms of productizing their idea, validating their idea at scale, and now they're looking for the next leap. So at the government level, I cannot experiment with that kind of a high risk, that kind of a high risk index, that I bring in a startup technology and put that technology in the center of the world of this kind of an ERP that we're talking about here, right?
Right.
I cannot take that risk, but I've been taking risk with at least this kind of a notion that this technology, this product, and this technology is scalable if it is given a chance beyond a specific threshold. And the ERP platform that I've built, right, the novel ERP platform we call Resource Management System for COVID, that is built on a particular product which had some kind of a proven scale.
Right.
And then I've taken it to the next level where now it is pervasive across the country.
Yeah, it's a very good approach.
But if I can jump in, I think Saad, what you described, I think it's again a good example. There are many different ways how you can limit the scope of the risk realizing, right? I think that was the example of the program you described. So even if you need to, I think there's a lot of talk also in corporate world of big organizations that how do you nurture, how do you still embrace experimentation at the side of your core business, right?
Right.
How do you do it? You build those places, pockets, programs to basically bring in experimentation so it doesn't hurt your core business, but you can still build on top of this. And if it works, then obviously scale to the core of it. So that's the same way we try to see more and more in our government as well. We have a very healthy, very vibrant startup community. Some even say, most unicorns per capita in the world. Again, in a country of 1 million, it's not too hard. But the point being that we somehow need to connect our digital government building exactly their practices, their products and stuff. How you do it? We try to come up with legal arrangements, different hackathon mechanisms, different sort of funding mechanisms, just like you, to make this experimentation safe on the side, and then scale in from that. Obviously, scaling is a bit hard to do in government, just because any government, again, the bureaucracy stuff that you described. But if we don't manage this, we lose out on an opportunity. And yeah, but I think there's one more thing that I don't know what about you guys, but we have tried to work as startups, as tech companies in our government for quite some time. We launched about 5 years ago something we call e-Residency program, which is that anyone in the world can apply and get Estonian digital identity and basically, run a company through Estonia, for example, being based in Pakistan or wherever in the world. We came up with it exactly like startups do. Go in, fail fast, iterate fast, and so forth. We have found that everything else we can tweak and sort of bring the culture and the mind to the practice to government, except one thing: fundraising. So the budget cycles of government don't lend to scaling too well because they're just so slow and they're longer in terms of the funding process. It's not like I have a booming product, I do series now, I do another series in 6 months. No, every lag is like 2-year cycle looking ahead. So I think we somehow need to break the bureaucracy of current budgeting systems and also a bit of the bureaucracy of current procurement systems, and then we fundamentally can embrace startup in approaching government.
One food for thought is that I completely agree with a place in a large organization for a small pocket of innovation. Even big corporations, let's say even Microsoft, they suffer from a very high level of bureaucracy, and they have no choice but to create those pockets of innovation within their corporations. But I think one of the things that I'm pushing for on my end is that every new person that we hire in government, that we need to have a certain level of expectation around the core competencies, a core competency around data understanding, core competency around innovation. Doesn't matter if that person is going to run the bus department or the sewage department. They don't have to be in IT in order to be in government. And that is the kind of cultural shift that at least on my end we are trying to promote. Arzish, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, so I think we're in the last 9 minutes, and before this session ends, there's some specific questions as well. So I'll start with Siim. There's a question related to e-residency which you covered, but if you can also talk about its benefits for your government and also the startup visa program, which is in Estonia, and I think a lot of people apply, and it's amazing that you have like a 10-day approval time, right? So maybe you can shed some light on it.
Sure. No, we talked about size before a bit, and obviously you were smiling about the 1.3 million in Estonia. Look, we envy you in Pakistan. If we had so many people, we would rule the world. I'm joking. In a sense that our biggest inhibitor is exactly we have way more ideas in tech sector, in government, than people to do it with. So this is exactly why we've been trying hard to find ways to augment by collaboration with outside world, as well as sort of obviously or attracting talent in. Startup visa is an example of that. Basically a program to very streamlined process. If you want to run a company, especially bring something live to European market, come over. We'd be happy to have you in our community and sort of spring from there. E-residency is like a milder option for that. Basically, e-residency doesn't give you like actual physical residency or passport or visa, but it gives you access to digitally create a company, run it from a distance, so forth, so that you can sell your services globally or to European market, for example. Why we do it as a government, basically to attract again more entrepreneurs to Estonian community, even if they are their own digitally. But that's okay too, because they still contribute, they still do business with Estonian companies, they still make our economy bigger, as well as end up paying a bit of taxes. So the idea has been to we can grow digitally faster than in real world. Literally every week, before COVID at least, every week we got more e-residents joining Estonian economy than we had babies born in the country. And wow. E-residents are immediately economically active babies, perhaps 20 years down the line, right? So that's the idea, that we are embracing these new means how to basically make ourselves bigger as a community, as a country, as an economy.
I think that's a fantastic program, and you talked about Pakistan's massive population. So I think one of the biggest benefits has been that there are people like Saad and Shabahat who went out and did really well for themselves and have found ways to give back to the country, right? So we have this amazing diaspora. And I think one of the strategies that we must do as a country, and even as the startup ecosystem, is send as many startups outside as we can, right? So we have this massive diaspora in Silicon Valley. A lot of startups go there, but right, Estonia is an amazing location. I personally know, like, I think 3 startups that have got into the program in the past 6 months, right? So I think these are amazing opportunities for our economy as well, right? Where some of the local challenges are solved by, maybe the founders moving to Estonia, but still they have this huge tech talent employed in the country. So it's kind of a win-win. With this, I'll put my next question to Saad. Seattle has this uh, very high tech ecosystem, partly because of Amazon and Microsoft and how they've impacted the local economy. So the question for you is, how have these companies played a role in empowering the citizens of Seattle? And what examples can probably Pakistan take in terms of public-private partnerships?
Right. The city of Seattle is, like you said, is very fortunate. We were surrounded with Expedia and Tableau and Zillow and so many others. So I think there are 2 things to keep in mind. One is one of the best things sometimes governments can do to have a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem is to get out of the way. We don't have to be in front of every innovation that's going on in the city. So, we have to be careful, where do we make our presence felt? And so that's one thing to keep in mind. The other is, we have a table of Innovation Advisory Council. It's the who's who at a senior level of some of the big heavyweights in the city. And through them, we are working on some of the systemic problems that Seattle faces, from homelessness to high cost of living, to youth employment, to affordability. And all of those themes are then attacked by the private sector, who are lending their intellectual expertise, but also in many cases their actual people who are working alongside City of Seattle employees to come up with some new solutions. So in the recent past, for example, we have come up with a youth portal, affordability portal, a whole bunch of different ways, which on the surface may seem just like another website with another bunch of forms, but behind them there's a whole amount of thinking that has gone with in partnership with the private sector. I would be the first one to admit, as the CTO for the city, that we probably don't take advantage of the private sector enough. And one of the learnings from COVID is that the next time we have a little bit of a breathing room, we are going to go back to the private sector and engage them a lot more.
No, that's a fantastic point that you're highlighting, right? That you should engage more the private sector, right? I think for Pakistan, one of the challenges probably, which I think still needs to be solved, is that we have all these big tech companies in the country, but still a lot of government contracts may end up with international organizations, right? And there's this movement being pushed by the IT community to have like a Make in Pakistan policy to give first right to Pakistani tech companies, which have done tremendously well, right? So my next question would be for Shabahat, and this is digital government gets a lot of traction by enabling content in local language, right? So how are we addressing this issue in Pakistan? I know that the COVID portal has like an Urdu version, I think, but is Urdu being considered as a front end language for the masses and all these digital platforms for the government that address the general public?
Hmm.
Yeah. So what we are doing, I mean, I'll give you a very straight and simple answer to this. We are making sure that whatever portal or whatever system that we build, especially on the mobile handheld devices, there has to be a version which should be built in Urdu, in the local national language. Um, I think more than 70 to 80%, or close to 80% of the population of Pakistan perhaps doesn't know how to read English. They are, even when they are educated, there's certain segments where they would find it hard to read English. Mobile penetration is close to 80%, right? I think all of those people are pretty familiar, at least educated enough to read Urdu, right? If not educated all the way. So I think we have done a very good job in the last year and a half to build solutions, applications in the local language. But we are also trying to make sure that all of these people should also see and visualize what is going on in the rest of the world as well. Right? We also tend to give them a flavor to startups, also to the users, also that what is going on in the rest of the world, and what the world is adopting, that you should think about adopting yourself. So I'm trying to mix and match the flavor of both.
No, that's amazing, and I think it is evident by seeing platforms like probably Urdu Point being one of the most visited Pakistani websites, that there are a lot more people who can consume content in the local language as compared to let's say
Yeah,
English, right? And I
yeah.
think we're close to our we're at our ending time, but I'd like to take this opportunity to ask each of you if you have some closing remarks for the audience.
Okay. Sim, did you want to go first?
I can. Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks really for this small chat, and always happy to see if our experience and our solutions from Estonia can somehow help in the journey in Pakistan or Seattle for that matter. Otherwise, so feel free to find us and hit us up like that. And my last, perhaps just wanted to say that what I said at the beginning, that what we have learned from COVID is that digital works. I think in many ways, like we have spoken here in this chat as well, often it's not about trying to find out the best solution, but just start doing it. Just like Shabahat and did with ERP and stuff. Just boil it down to the essence, start doing it. It will work the best this way.
Thank you. And I can go next. Thank you, Arzesh, again for you and the organization for setting this up. Two very quick messages. One is retention of talent has become a much bigger challenge now because of the remote work environment, which is going to be going on for the long term. So I think that is top of mind for us, and what strategies we can put in place to keep that talent in house. And the second is that we have a fantastic opportunity to make mistakes, and we can blame it on COVID. And I would say that whenever things like these come our way, as government leaders, we can take a little bit more risk than usual because we have a pandemic to finger point. Those would be the two things.
No, that's an amazing point. Over to you, Shabbat.
Yeah, so I think I'll come first of all. I'll just talk on behalf or talking to our audience in Pakistan also, and then I can talk a little bit generically. I think this COVID pandemic is real. It happens once in every 100 years. It happens once, and we have been unfortunate that in our lifetime it has happened. It's gonna be there to stay for a while, and it's real, right? It's very very real. I mean, you cannot see it, but you once you get it, you really feel it really really hard. So my message to everyone in different parts of the world, especially in Pakistan, this is a real threat. You have to be disciplined to follow the directions of the government, how to stay away from it, how to keep your near and dears, your friends, your relatives away from this pandemic, because it it becomes suddenly lethal if you have got some kind of if you are in a specific age bracket, in the kind of threshold that we are into, that you are in some kind of if you are in an age bracket where it's hard for you to endure certain symptoms. So you have to be very very careful. That's number one. Generically, I think we've talked enough about digital economy, digital landscape. I think going digital comes with a price, right? It comes with at a cost. Every individual needs to think of himself as well as he should think about the society also. What is that fine line that you have to believe in and which you have to strike once you are adopting a digital solution, right? Adopting a digital solution in the context of society means a lot. There is a digital solution for your own self as a person, and there is a digital solution which has got a bigger impact on the society. So I think that this is something that you need to always think about once you are thinking that why you should go digital. Think about the cost that you are actually paying and the cost that you can endure as a person as well as a part of society.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And again, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Just to Just to share one message from my side, one of you mentioned that this is the year of survival, right? I think so. That's the message for the audience as well. That whatever whatever our plans were, they've been cancelled, they've been rescheduled, and this year is not for doing all the big things maybe, but this year is just to stay at home, maintain social distance, and then survive, and we can do all the things when this is over. With this, I'd like to thank all the amazing people who have tuned into this live session or are watching afterwards. And thank you so much, Saad, for making the connections happen and making this session happen and joining in. Thank you so much, Siim, for sharing your insights and input, and especially all the fantastic things that Estonia has been spearheading even before covered in terms of e-governance. And thank you so much, Shabahat, for your input and also for all the fantastic work that you have done over the past year. I think Startup Grind Islamabad was the first public event where you came to the
Hmm.
NIC and everything, and
Yeah.
this has been 1 year for your journey, and thanks a lot for doing what you do. Thank you so much, everyone.
Nice to meet
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Take care. All the
Good
best.
luck.
Bye.
Yeah.